All right. Well, welcome back to another Timeout Tuesday podcast. My name is Josh Pardee, senior pastor here at Hope. We're also glad to have you along with us. We also, as we have been doing throughout this entire series, we have Pastor Sam Burke. How are you today, Sam?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Really good.
And we also have Pastor Nate Murray. How are you, Nate?
I'm well.
Yeah. Good. Good. All right. We're headed into full summer. I have one child out of school, two that get out Wednesday.
Oh, fun.
So we're in the changing of the seasons here, kind of going full summer mode in the Pardee household. I assume that's same in both y'all's households.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So two of my kids are going back to summer school.
Oh, are they? Okay.
And one of them is going to be working 7 to 2. So
Nice. So you guys kind of keep a little bit of the same rhythm almost.
Yep, it's really good.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So here's my question. Full on summer mode. What is your favorite summer snack? Here's what I was gonna ask originally. I thought of ice cream, and what's your favorite ice cream flavor? So we could do that, but then also, is that your favorite snack? I'll ask it that way. So what's your favorite ice cream flavor? And is it your choice of snack, or would you choose something over ice cream in the summer? I'll go first. I like, first of all, in general, I'm more of a savory guy than a sweets guy.
Yep.
But if there is ice cream, I like Moose Tracks a lot.
Oh.
Or there's a Mackinac Fudge.
Yep. I've seen that.
That ice cream is really good. Those are a couple of my favorites. Yeah.
So at Mooney's Ice Cream.
Yes, I have not been yet.
Oh, that's great.
We were going to stop.
Gotta have
you have
cash,
to have
though.
cash.
Yeah.
We were going to stop recently. Did not have cash.
So they have a blueberry waffle cone ice cream. That's like my favorite.
Okay.
But that's not my snack of choice because I'm a savory person too.
Okay.
My snack of choice that I found out just a couple years ago, you could only get in certain places like Tawas and other side of the state. These things called Pronto Pups. They're like hot dogs. They're corn dogs.
Okay.
But they're like really super skinny corn dogs. You can get them up in Tawas. They're awesome. So,
All right.
you ever had one of those?
I have not had one of
Oh,
those.
they're
No.
good.
I love ice cream.
Okay.
There's actually, I read a study that ice cream is actually good for you.
Okay.
Like if you're going to indulge in a sweet treat, it actually has a lot of good nutrients in it too. It has some healthy fats. It has, calcium, all the good stuff that comes with the dairy. Anyway, so you can feel good about eating ice cream.
That's great.
As I do. But I do love ice cream. It's one of my favorites. And it's hard to pick one because there's times like if I'm in like a salty kind of mood, then like cookie dough, like a really good cookie dough ice cream is pretty hard to beat.
Salted caramel.
Yeah, that's pretty good too. Yeah. But then I really like summer, especially. I really like more fruity varieties of ice cream. Like there's a place called Cream and Sugar in Bay City. It's opening up in Saginaw, and they have like a lemon blueberry ice
You're
cream.
getting cheers from the
That
back
was
row.
Amber. That's Amber. Thank you, Amber. Silently in the background, waiting for us to talk about lemon blueberry ice cream. It is really good, Amber. You're right. So they have an amazing, and then they have this amazing bubble cone on top of that.
Yeah, those are
That
great.
is ridiculous. It's so good. And I may have dreamt about a bubble cone. So it's really good. But then I also have to give a plug because we have a family in Bay City that own an ice cream business, and it's called the Dairy Firm. The Crafts, and he grew up on a dairy, and then they sell ice cream. They're actually always at our worship night at Winona Park each summer.
Oh, yeah.
They're the ones there giving ice cream away. It's paid for, but they give it away to the people that are there at the park, and it's really, really good stuff too. So anyway, but yeah, ice cream's amazing.
You really had a lot to bring for us.
Well, I'm
there.
glad we finally talked about something I care about.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we hopefully
2 weeks in a row, the Celtics and now ice cream.
hopefully, helpful for all of those listening along. I mean, some
Right.
new ice cream places to
There you
check
go.
out
Yeah.
this summer. So, come here for the tips, and you learn that it could potentially be healthy for you.
Not potentially, it is healthy.
Let's hope that is true. And
I'm claiming.
speaking of hope, let's transition. See what I did there? See what I did there?
Someone
a
told me
heavy
that you
lift.
can find whatever it is you're looking for. So
I still haven't found what I'm looking for, but that's a different thing. All right, let's go into the sermon this past week of talking about hope.
Yeah.
Right. Sam, you were leading us, and we were completing the last of the I am statements that we were looking at, where Jesus says he is the resurrection and the life, right? And you kind of started off by talking about the movie Dan in Real Life,
yes,
right? And how there's a quote that comes from there that life is full of
disappointments. I thought for sure that there would be more people raising their hand that have seen this movie. I looked around and I'm going, I guess it's me and about 6 of us in here. Great. Okay.
I raised my hand. Okay. I saw it.
I wonder if there was an appreciable bump on Netflix or whatever streaming service it's on.
I don't know.
There was 20. It went up by 20 after the service.
So as we think about disappointment, I mean, for sure, part of the human experience, all of us have experienced disappointment, right? And that can be, I don't know, we can find some disillusionment there. Like we can find these moments where it comes out of nowhere a little bit, where we weren't ready for it. But it is a reality of our life. And so I was just thinking about, even as you were kind of leading us through, Jesus, like the people that you're talking about in the passage, like they're right next to Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're still experiencing this profound moment, right? Where Lazarus passes away.
Yeah.
And they're experiencing huge disappointment. And it feels like even in the story, there's disappointment towards Jesus.
With Jesus, yeah.
Like, hey, if you would have been here.
Right.
And then the crowds are like, I mean, he healed the blind. Why couldn't he, raise this guy to life?
Why did you wait 2 days?
Yeah.
Like, I'm wondering if the disciples going, why did you wait? Like, why did you hesitate? Kind of a deal. And I think that's Martha's response too, is like, if you just had been here, like, I know that what would have happened, kind of a deal,
Yeah. Oh, so I just want to draw us, and we can hang out here for a minute, but just on this idea that being in close proximity to Jesus does not excuse us from disappointment, right? Like
life is life, right?
Yeah, life is life. And so what does it mean then to walk with Jesus, and how does that change how we enter into disappointment?
Right. Well, I think, personal experience from, going through stuff with my daughter and everything, you have these moments where you go, in moments where I'm like, where I would love to say I'm like spiritually mature enough to be able to handle those kind of situations, but but you just get to those points where you're like, in dark moments where you go like, where were you, God? Like, why did this have to happen? Why did you allow this to go that way? And you wrestle with all of that. I mean, as I'm studying, I'm literally was like wiping tears on my, like, when Martha says, if you had just been here earlier, I know you would have intervened. And I'm writing it down. Have you ever felt like that? I'm like, yes. Raise my own hand, kind of a deal. And one of the things that I learned through that whole process is that oftentimes what Jesus said at the beginning goes, I'm going here to do this so that you may believe. I'm not going to go fix the problem like the way you want me to. I'm going to hang out for a little bit, but I'm going to show you I'm with you through the whole thing. And his compassion takes over, and he's literally like showing us how to walk compassionately with people who are grieving and going through that process. And one of the things that I learned in my own life going through this, this kind of a process, is that God promises to be with us through those things. He doesn't always promise to fix the whole thing or give us the result that we had hoped for or expected him to give us, but he promises to be with us through it and to show us who he is through it, which can be difficult. Sometimes we get the outcome that we want and we hope for. Sometimes we don't, but we always can see the presence of God in the midst of it. And if we're willing to, it can go one of either ways. We can either lean into that presence, or we can walk away and just be like, I knew you weren't going to be here. I knew you were going to do this, so I'm out, kind of a deal. And I would encourage people to lean in to see what Jesus does in and through you in the midst of that.
Yeah. So as we think about that, maybe even just for both of you, I would ask, what have you found helpful in your own life when you're processing disappointment?
Yeah.
Like, what are some tangible tools, things that are in your guys' tool belts, or if you have someone sitting in your office looking for pastoral counsel that's up against, I mean, it could be a variety of things, disappointment of life didn't turn out the way I was hoping it would. I can't stand my job.
Right.
The diagnosis went the wrong way. All lost a loved one, right? Like, could be big moments or small things. But what are helpful things that we can hand people walking through disappointment?
I think one thing I think about is timelines. And I think I even said that in the message last week, because it's easy for us to think about doing things in our own strength or doing things in our own ability or out of our own resources. But one of the things we don't think about is how much we want to put things on our timeline instead of God's. And I know for me, a lot of my disappointments in life were that God wasn't operating on my timeline. Sure. And it was like, I want this thing to happen, but it's not happening soon enough, that kind of thing. But there's a reason he chooses the timelines that he does, just like Lazarus. He had purposes in mind for those 2 days, purposes where he was, maybe purposes in the journey to get there, purposes to wait those 2 days. And we don't always understand the timeline, but we have to be mindful that God does have a timeline and that his perspective on timeline is way different than ours too, because it's an eternal perspective on time instead of our like in the moment right now kind of thing. And then I think the other thing is a lot of the time we jump to like, why did God do this to me? If it's something that's bad, if it's hurtful or it's pain, that kind of thing. It's why did God do this to me? Instead of all that God did was because these kinds of things happen. So it's really the reverse of it. Instead of God is making me suffer, instead it's no, God did everything that he did in Jesus because of things like this, because he's not okay with things like this.
Right.
It's not that he's causing this to you. This is the work that he's done to save us, is to save us from these circumstances that he agrees are not good and not okay. What about you, Sam?
So like what I needed in those moments were people who were like, I'm just going to be with you and allow me to process out loud, even if it was just raw and didn't try to correct the rawness. So whenever I have talked with people about this, I say, just presence is important. Don't give pithy answers and don't accept pithy answers. I think sometimes we can be quick to go, well, let me be the answer person for you versus going, I don't really have a lot of the specific answers that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And on the receiving side, not being willing to jump to, well, this must mean this, and this must mean this.
Connecting all the dots instantly.
Right.
Yep.
Because that can lead to really faulty assumptions about who God is and what his presence is doing in the moment, kind of a deal. And you kind of go, well, yeah, this must be what's going on. And then you turn around to someone else who's suffering through something similar and you try to give them those same answers and the result doesn't turn out the way yours did.
Right.
And then you're kind of going, well, it worked for me. I don't know why it's not working for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the folly of Job's friends, right? Who instantly have to have an answer and provide a whole worldview, and they're missing even, God's correction in some senses is also against their wisdom, right?
Yeah, and I remember walking a family through a sudden death of a loved one this past summer, and it was, someone passing away way before they, should have, kind of a thing, and saying, I don't have a lot of answers.
Yeah.
In the midst of this, I can be with you through it. I can provide presence. And then talking about, and God may not ever give you the answers you're looking for, but he promises to be with you through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
And so that's important, to recognize his presence hugging you, with you in the midst of something that he also is saddened by, and that he also is grieving alongside with you. I mean, I think it's important that we do those kind of things and not try to like be the answer person all the time.
Right. So given the reality that we're all going to experience disappointment and frustration, right? And part of where you led us was this reality that we have to have our hope built on something bigger.
Yeah.
Something that transcends my daily experience even, or daily life. And even big picture of life is we all get to live different lives, and some live harder lives than others.
Right.
Some have the diagnosis or things that happen in their life that are just completely unfair or, are not how they ought to be. And I think grieve the heart of the Father and Jesus and all of those sorts of things. So you talked about how Jesus is our hope,
Yeah.
right? And asked us the question, what are we putting our hope in?
Right.
Right. So what do you see people putting hope in other than Jesus? And I don't want to talk about like non-Christians, but
Right.
like us as followers of Jesus, it's easy to pick on people who were like,
right.
We like to think that we have it all together, but like in our own daily lives, what are areas that we still maybe are putting our hope in something other than Jesus? And what does that look like?
Well, I don't think it looks too dissimilar.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I think it's things like financial security, having, my dream job or having a job that's going to provide stability, those things are when those things are unsettled, hope is very fickle for people sometimes.
Yeah.
I think this government stuff, like we're going to see this happening like all the way up through November, past November, like placing our hope in a political party taking over and getting us what we want versus what the, or a person.
Right.
Sometimes, don't want to be too negative here, but I think sometimes people can even place their hope in their spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
My pastor this or that, and then they let them down and you're like,
Right.
how could you, kind of a deal. And then their hopes get dashed. And so I think there's a lot of things that they put their hope in that is tangible and not eternal. And I think that they would never say that their hope wasn't in Jesus.
Sure.
But I think you can kind of quickly go, hey, well, really, like, I alluded to that in the service. Like, if we put aside that pat answer for a second and you really went through your life and took a mirror to it and said, okay, what is it that what's your security found in and your hope found in? Like, you would see these things start popping up left and right because if I took away this, if I took away this,
Right.
if I took away health,
Right.
what would that look? How would that, hit you? If I took away finances, how would that hit you? If I took away your home, how would that hit you? Like that kind of stuff.
We're all just insecure 7th graders running around acting like we're adults.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think security is the big thing there. I love, I think we're driven by insecurities most of the time, whether we're a believer or not. We default to insecurity, and we see it with Adam and Eve in the garden.
Yeah.
As soon as sin entered the picture, they were insecure.
Yep.
They hid, they lied. It was all insecurity. And I think, I remember when I was a 7th grader and I was struggling with insecurity, I had a leader say, because for me specifically, it was like large spaces. Like I'd walk into the lunchroom and I was like, what do people think about me? And,
Sure.
And I had a leader at the time that was like, buddy. And first of all, they called me buddy, which was a mistake. Don't call me buddy. Famously. But they're like, buddy, man, when you walk in that lunchroom, everybody else is worried about what you think about them and what everybody else thinks about them. It's a room full of people worried about what other people think about them. And that really helped me at the time. But I think it's still true. And so I think everything you listed, Sam, is right. But I also think one of the big things is how people see us. I think so many of the decisions we make is based on how we perceive ourselves or how we think people perceive us.
Yep.
And it goes back to that insecurity. And I see people put their hope in all kinds of crazy things because it gives them some, small measure of security or some small measure of like, people like this one thing about me when I was 25. And so now it's my whole identity.
Sure.
Yep.
And we see that with our kids, right? All the time. Like, it's like, oh, wait, I'm special in this way. Well, then I'm going to put all my energy into that.
Right. Yep.
But it can be really fragile. And then that just continues as we grow into adulthood.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about, that's all really good. I think one of the temptations we have as followers of Jesus is that we can then attach Jesus' name to our own agenda, right? So that is a little bit different than those who are outside of the family of God, right? We will take all of those same things, but then we find different passages or different verses, and we kind of just start interpreting them through like a way that this happens in theology that is blatant in our minds would be kind of like the prosperity gospel, right? Where it's health and wellness. If you just have enough faith, then you're going to be blessed, and all of this sort of stuff. And so we would look at that and say, well, that's clearly they're distorting, twisting scripture, all of that sort of stuff. But I do think we do that with Jesus a lot of times, where we have all of those things that we desire, and I don't think those are bad desires either, right? No. Like that, it is how things are supposed to be. Like we want to celebrate when people have good jobs and good health and thriving communities and all of those sorts of things. That's all part of God's kingdom, right? Of how things ought to be. But what can happen is then when those things don't happen, or we experience the disappointment, we can feel a little disillusioned. We can feel like Jesus has let us down almost, right? Because we've constructed him in some senses in our own image. And so as I think about where we opened this series, I opened this series by showing us 2 pictures of Jesus, right? The Warner Salmon photo that we kind of all have in our minds. And then the one that was put together, I think by the BBC, of they kind of reconstructed Jesus as what an average Galilean would look like. And those were 2 very different pictures, right? And so I think it's just important for us to kind of keep in mind that if we're believing that Jesus, if we're taking Jesus at his word, believing who he is, we find that even the people in this story who are very close to him, I mean, Jesus is with these people regularly. Some will even argue that Lazarus is actually the beloved disciple that's talked about. It's not the common church tradition, but there is that line of thinking out there. So like, these are people who were very near to Jesus, and yet they're experiencing profound disappointment and frustration. They're getting a different picture of what Jesus is than what they had constructed in their mind of what he was supposed to be. And so I just think it's really important to keep on our radar that this journey through life is going to probably constantly be him kind of repainting little different parts of the portrait of who we understand him to be, and reworking and tinkering. And so if we keep the theme of Jesus being the resurrection and the life, right? And this is the ultimate place of hope, right? And that is the foundation of our entire faith, is that Jesus died and rose again. How do we hold on to that tension of like Jesus changing things in our life, us getting a different picture of him, but also holding on to the hope that he is the resurrection and the life?
That's a great question. I think it's one that Martha actually faces, because she's got it all worked out in her head, right? And I don't think Martha is wrong for saying what she does to Jesus. Like, if you had been here, I don't think he would have died. Like, because what in Jesus's ministry would have led her to believe something different about that, right? She's watching him do all this stuff, and she's like, I know that if you were here, this would have been different. What she doesn't know is what Jesus knows, though. And I think sometimes we can project, like Martha, project onto Jesus what we want him to be and what we've seen him do with other people, and not realizing that maybe he has a different way he wants to lead us in this. And I think him not really correcting her, but helping her see all of her beliefs, all of her through him. And then when he says, I am the resurrection and the life, I think what that does for her is to go, okay, I know what I believe, but now I can see how you are my agenda, and you are the thing I need to put my hope in, not in some far off belief here, not in something else, not in the fact that you can do this or that, like, but in who you are as a person.
I think it's the question that we need to learn to ask all the time, not just in disappointments, but in successes too. And that's, Jesus, I know you're always at work. We talk about that all the time. Jesus is always working, and I think he's always working to draw people near to the Father. So if that is true, then what are you doing in this? And I agree with you. I don't think Martha was wrong in her her initial thinking, but I think the only thing that could have been better is if she had started with, all right, Jesus, I don't understand it.
I don't get it, but what are you doing?
But what are you doing in this to draw me near to the Father, draw all these other people near to the Father? And again, that's a question we can ask in disappointment, and it'll help frame our perspective. But then it's also something we can, ask when we get the promotion, when when we're celebrated in some way, and instead of just owning it and like, yeah, I did this, instead it's like, all right, Jesus, you don't waste anything. So success, failure, disappointment, heartache, all of it. What are you at work doing?
Right.
And I think that's what a mature disciple is always aware of, is like, how is Jesus at work in this situation, this relationship, and how is he inviting me to join him in what he's doing instead of pursuing my own agenda?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought, as I was studying this through, what if Jesus has this discourse with Martha and then chooses not to raise Lazarus from the dead? And he just says, I need you to understand who I am, and I need you to understand this, even if the circumstances don't go the way you want them to go.
Sure.
Because there were powerful.
There were a lot of people that, I mean, Jesus had other followers during those 3 years that undoubtedly died.
Yeah.
And he could have intervened in any of those situations.
Yeah.
And Lazarus wasn't the only one sick in that area at that time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think he had a divine purpose, of course, that he wanted to do this. And he told his disciples ahead of time, I'm going to go do this so that you can see my glory. And I think that's ultimately what he says before he raises Lazarus. Is, I'm doing this so that people can see who I really am. But I think his discourse with Martha was to set up, like, I need you to understand who I am, whether or not things go go this way or not. See your theology through me and see your beliefs through me. And then I think that's why the passage keeps going. It's like he sees there and he has compassion on them.
Yeah.
And he enters into their sorrow, enters into them with compassion. And then he says, I want everyone to see who I really am.
Yeah.
Kind of a deal.
I was just thinking about how pastoral Jesus is in this moment, right? And I think we all need pastors, right? Like I need pastors in my life, people who can help lead us and shepherd us in these moments. And I was just thinking about, as you guys were teasing out Martha there a little bit, of when I taught about Thomas a couple weeks ago on the way, the truth, and the life. Like Jesus gives him permission essentially to come with his questions. And so again, I just see Jesus like he is leading Martha, but it's not in a like, well, you should have asked the question this way, or you should understand this about me, or like it is this just like gentle pastoral shepherding, like all of this imagery we have of who Jesus even says he is, that he is the good shepherd, right? Who's like walking them through the grieving process, explaining theologically how this all works, and whether he's going to raise him or not, that real hope isn't going to come from this moment where Lazarus is going to be raised from the dead.
Right.
That's going to be a small foretaste of what's to come, right? Yeah. And I mean, I just have to imagine an incredibly powerful moment that you're about to experience, but it's a signpost for what's coming. It's a signpost for where all of creation is headed.
Right.
The story that we believe to be true is that this is something we all get to experience on the other side. And so I think that is too where the piece of hope comes in, is it goes beyond. There's this ability. I think one of the things that I hold on to in my life is, no matter how this life shakes out, my hope is not built on this life, right? It is built on this fact that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And so maybe this life isn't going to turn out in all the ways that I want. And maybe that's in small things of someone showed up late for a meeting and I'm frustrated and disappointed about it. Or maybe it's a really big thing in life, or anything in between. But it is this unabashed hope that cannot be shaken, in understanding that Jesus is revealing, like, this is who I am. And I just think it's incredibly powerful, and I think when you start there, it really just changes the entire trajectory of your life, right? When you're not overwhelmed by the disappointment or building a case of, oh, here it is again, this is how my life always goes. I think it just sends you down two very different paths, even.
100%. I think if Jesus just taught good things, then he died and didn't raise again from the dead, there's no hope from the disciples.
Right.
They're running, they're scattered, they're like, whatever, we're done.
Totally.
I think what gives them this ability to say, no, there's hope, is this resurrection thing. And then they know, oh, he's the first fruits. And I love that Paul talks about that. He's the first fruits of those who are raised from the dead. And it's like, therein lies the hope.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
And on that front, just if we switch gears a little bit, our goal this year is to know our neighbors by name and by need at Hopevale. Yeah. And we want every Hopevaler to know their neighbors by name and by need. And as you were teaching yesterday, that's one of the things that occurred to me, especially as you were landing things, was that question that you asked. I think you can alter it just a little bit and it becomes a tool to know your neighbors by name and by need.
Yeah.
And that's just a really simple question to talk with your friends and neighbors. And that's, where do you turn for hope?
Right.
Just knowing that everyone needs hope right now in a variety of ways, because everyone is insecure and everyone is finding what they've found security in to fail them in different ways. And we're going to see that unfold a lot in the coming months. But because everyone needs hope, ask your friends, ask your neighbors, ask your coworkers, ask your family, where do you turn for hope? Because we're all looking for that open door of like, well, how do I invite my friends and neighbors to know and follow Jesus? And a conversation is one of the ways that can do it. And that's such a good question because it's not loaded.
Right.
And it's honestly giving them an opportunity. Well, you know, I guess, you know, if something were to happen, we got plenty of money in the bank, or, you know, my family is where I turn for hope, and they may have good things that they can turn to and talk about. But then whatever they respond with, we have the opportunity to talk about the hope that Jesus gives us.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage, if we can make that turn, that
absolutely.
Our people use that. They add that to their toolbox of talk to your friends, neighbors, coworkers, family members. Where do you turn for hope? And then listen, just let them talk. And it may even be like a second conversation later where you're like, you remember when we were talking about hope? I really want to tell you where I turn for hope.
Yeah.
But I think it could be a really effective tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with what we talked about Sunday of us being ready to give an answer for the hope that we have. I think Scripture talks about that. And then when we ask someone else that hope and they ask us that question, we need to wrestle through that first before we start go wrestling. I mean, together wrestle is good, but I think having a good answer of, well, this is why I found my hope in Jesus.
Yeah,
you know?
That's really good. Because I promise you, test me. Ask someone where they turn for hope. Let them answer, and then don't say anything.
Yep.
And I can guarantee you that 8 times out of 10, they're going to say, well, what about you?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of times we use that scripture to be like, oh, we need to defend the faith or whatever. I think honestly what that scripture is teaching us is we need to be ready to answer with the hope that we have. Just say, here's where I turn for hope. And here's how I can eliminate all these other things as my hope, and just say, no, this is the resurrection of Jesus and him embodying hope that's where my hope's at.
Yeah. And I think there's a way to even ask it where, I mean, yes, if they ask you, but it's not to like try and game them or,
you're honestly
saying
saying
that.
yeah.
But I think it's important to say of like, you're just legitimately, that's a way that you care about your family member, your neighbor, your friend, or whoever it is, of like getting to know them. It's just a great question. And you get to learn about humans and what we think about and what we prioritize. And as you begin to have those conversations, it just creates more space. And I totally agree. Most of the time people are going to reciprocate and ask you the same exact question, right? So you get to kind of lead the conversation in that sense. So very good. Well, it was great, Sam. Thanks so much for leading us.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. And we do have a lot of hope that we can lean on. Coming up on the podcast, just want to clue all of you in. We are going to be transitioning to our summer playlist series, and we're going to be taking the summer off from doing weekly podcasts here on Timeout Tuesday. We're going to be replaying some of our favorite episodes throughout the past year, so you can catch up on those, and we will be back after that, but we hope to see you Sunday for the start of our new series, Summer Playlist.